Ready, Freddy.
All right. Fit Family Podcast presents The Family and Fit Family, Part 3, entitled Mama. Okay, this is Renee Peacock Dothard, aka Mama. And it was funny when we got married. I told all my friends, I was just kind of joking, that I married up. Not one of my friends at the time, not one, disagreed with me. Not one. I go, I married up. Yeah, you did. Yeah, okay. So that just wanted you to know, after 26 years, that never got old. So she's from South Carolina, grew up there, and I kind of break up her personality into two people, between her father and her mother, and also, I guess, being a woman of the South, growing up in South Carolina, kind of pre and post, unfortunately, parents' divorce. But, her dad was a Marine retired. And let me remind anyone that has a Marine retired in their family, it's never former Marine. Okay, it is Marine retired. I made that mistake one time with Jim Peacock, and I never made it again. I think he had some initial reservations. We got engaged, but I think nobody's good for my little girl. It's that dad syndrome. But he was, our entire marriage has just been nothing but supportive, and did nothing but help us throughout our marriage until his passing. How long ago?
He died during COVID.
Oh, okay. All right. So I remember it's been a couple of years, but
yeah, August 2020.
Gotcha. All right. And I just remember, he always was the fun granddad. Like, my parents were older, and we went to visit him and was sitting in the house and watched television. But he had the boat for skiing and tubing. He had the pool at his house. He had a Pac-Man machine, and so he was the fun granddad. So my kids spent a lot of time with him, and despite the fact that he went through a couple of marriages during our marriage. Yeah, he went through 5 overall.
My mom was his first, and then he had 4 others.
Okay, I realized I did not know the number was that high, but the brother was supportive of ours, even though he wasn't fielding a good track record, even up until the last one, because I think your mom did more for him in his final days than his current wife did, probably.
Well, she didn't really have a good grip on English because she was Chinese.
Okay.
So she didn't really speak the language, so we spent more time learning Chinese.
There you have it. But truth be told, love Jim Peacock. He was very supportive, and he was a big part, I think, of her personality in a lot of good ways. That Marine retired comes out in Renee sometimes. And we have her mom and grandma, as she's affectionately called.
Basement dweller?
I do not call grandma a basement dweller, just so you know, grandma, I don't roll like that. Okay? But
it's a term of endearment.
Yes, Terry Peacock is AKA grandma, and she does live with us. And I think she initially was there to help from the loss of Miss Millie as our primary caregiver of the boys.
She was retiring.
Right.
And and she was the family, that we had. And it was, she was helping to care for Alex, and he went to Montessori school, so it wasn't full time.
Right. Yeah. But she is an indispensable part of the family.
Absolutely.
I mean, going on vacations and, just every day. And it's something like, I didn't grow up with music, with Matei playing piano in the house. And it's something I love. I love having that third generation. I love, especially when it's really quiet in our house. I know somebody's in trouble. So grandma is the one person I can go to. I go, hey, grandma, first of all, am I in trouble? So she's always been that good informant and that voice of reason sometimes when we need another voice, another adult in the room. And with 2 boys, and now one's 18 and one's in his mid-20s. So it's nice to have that older generation with all those years of wisdom to add their input, whether you want it or not. I'm just going to put that out there, but I never called basement dweller, so I think I should be batting like 500 right now.
Well, in all fairness, it was the kids that started that. But
Okay.
it is pretty funny.
All right. But I believe your personality is kind of a split between the two, and I think the stories I've heard from your upbringing, and I'm not going to step on them because we're going to cover them during your podcast, but I think you're a good balance between the two gifts that both of them bring to the table. And when it comes to you, I often call you the 1% of the 1%. And you push back a little bit, but factually, that's true. If you just look at her income, just being executive at a Fortune 50 company, just income wise, she's 1% of 1% as a woman earning revenue in this nation. If you were to look up how much she makes and where she falls statistically among other women, she would be 1% of the 1%. So that's just a fact. My favorite part of us getting married, though, was when she told me, because, unfortunately her parents got divorced. She told me, hey, this marriage thing is till death do us part. Let me repeat that. It's till death do us part. And as long as you remember that, then we can move this train forward. But if not, you can go propose to somebody else. But we eventually got married. We've been married over 26 years. And as you can see, I'm not dead yet, which is my response to every time I go to a doctor's appointment. She goes, how'd you do? I go, not dead yet. Not dead yet. So anyway, I think she's going to send me to doctors until one of them gives me bad news. But so far, 6 doctors this year and nothing. But I think that when you look at her story, coming from modest means in South Carolina and traveling the world, including, wait for it, Antarctica, okay, becoming an executive at one of the top companies in the world. And by the way, being married and raising 2 boys at the same time. So I think her story could only happen in America. And the fact that she's in a biracial marriage and married to me is like swimming, the English Channel with an anchor. But she's managed to do all these things with all these responsibilities. I wonder why your stress level's high. But I digress. So that's my intro. So without further ado, Renee Lynn Peacock Dothard, do you use your middle name still?
No.
Okay.
Peacock is my middle name.
Yeah, she tried to keep the Peacock. She's like, oh, I could keep my last name. I'm like, well, with your next husband. You ain't keeping it with this one.
I think it was my dad that wanted me to.
Yeah, your dad. Yeah, I told your dad to read his Bible. Anyway, I digress.
They didn't have last names.
Yes, well, there you go.
It was the daughter of.
And she's, by the way, you'll find out she's like a biblical scholar. I think she should be in the ministry. But anyway, your intro.
I don't know. You introduced me very well, I think.
Wow.
I don't know what else to
I did
say.
a good job. For those of you listening, please get out a piece of paper and mark 1 in my column, because you may not have to mark it again. But I do want that check. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Your intro. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, you did. You did a really good job.
Okay.
I maybe I'll step back a little bit. So yes, I was raised in the South. I was born in Florida. I was raised in South Carolina, and I moved to Georgia when I was, in my very early 20s, 21, 22, something like that. I had not finished my education. I actually struggled with my education, so which some people would find surprising, probably given my academia now. But I failed the 10th grade. So now
that is surprising, because I think anyone that knows you would call you an intellect. I mean,
yes,
the amount of books in her room. She looks like a hermit professor, and I mean, she does this stuff called Christian TikTok, and she has versions of the Quran and different versions of the Bible. Oh, by the way, and she took Hebrew to the point where she actually taught a Hebrew class.
I'm still taking Hebrew.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I mentioned we're not Jewish, so she named our second son a Jewish name. Is. Yeah, well, we do worship a Jewish carpenter, but I digress. Okay,
so, you're on. So why did I fail? I was bored. I look at our kids as well, who, also had, especially our oldest one, right? So Alex, also very bored with school. And I think it's not just the way some people teach, but what they teach. And at some point in your schooling, you're just you have an interest or a path that you think you want to go down, but you're not sure, but they don't really foster that. So I didn't fail 10th grade because of my grades. I failed because I didn't show up.
Right.
But
it's funny how your education has turned around. You have a thirst for knowledge now.
I had a low GPA. I struggled to get into college. I flunked out in my first year, just struggling to know what I was good at, what I wanted to do.
And you were in school when we met.
And I was in school when we met. So when I transferred to Georgia, I went to a community college for a year to gain residency because I paid for my own education. So I didn't have scholarships. I didn't have parents that could afford it. Like, we were always struggling. We didn't own a house. My mother was, worked for the state. And so
that's a good side story, that house.
Which
the house that you and your mom were in, where you had the fuel pumped out of
we call it the little house on the prairie. So we lived, so I drove a school bus when I was when I became a junior, and I finally decided I wanted more out of life. And I went to summer school, but I started my junior year, and in those days, you could drive a school bus when you were a teenager, so at 16. So that's how I learned how to drive a stick as well.
So imagine your kids being picked up by a school bus driver that's your kid's age.
Yeah. I drove a high school bus, 63 passengers, and drove it for the 2 years I was in high school.
Wow.
And by the way, statistically, teenagers who drove school buses had a lower accident rate than the adults do now. So just FYI.
Yeah, because now they hire people that are like 9,000 years old and like they can't see you, let alone what's in front of them.
And have a whole bunch of other problems. So anyway, I'm just going to put that out there that there were some pretty responsible school bus drivers even as teenagers. But again, digressing in the story. So I had finally kind of picked up where I wanted to do more, be better. But it was a struggle to get there. So
not be barefoot and pregnant like a lot of your
exactly
friends from the South. Yeah.
But catching up when you've fallen behind is really tough. And so even going into community college, I had to take a remedial English class to improve my writing.
Wow, that's just hard to believe now.
Just to be able to, understand what was going on in the class, because I'd missed, really so much. And honestly, even now they don't teach very well, the structure of sentences and so forth. And even through my Hebrew classes now, I learn more about English structure in order to understand the Hebrew. So
I remember when we were dating that, because we weren't spending a lot of time together because I was working and she was going to school, and she's just like, look, if you can't wait till I graduate. Okay.
I'll get to that in a minute.
She's just taking control of the whole this how. By the way, that check you gave me earlier, you can go ahead and just mark that one out.
Yeah. So, but kind of getting through the educational part, I went to community college for a year, and then I transferred into Georgia State, which is where I eventually got my undergrad. And even throughout my whole undergrad, just not knowing where it was, but I had a knack for numbers. I had a knack for remembering information, for being able to sort through information, get people to give me information. I had a real knack for that. As Robert would say, I'm a Snoopy Snoop. And so getting information is a thing I'm really good with. And so I got my undergraduate in finance. And eventually I kind of went to work for this company, a computer software company, but I was an analyst. And eventually there was a manager there. Her husband had started working for this company. It was a Danish company, and it was only a few consultants. And he goes, "Hey, do you want to, come be a consultant?" And I was like, I don't know. What does it do and how much does it pay? And it paid $20,000 more than I was making. I was like, yeah, I'm whatever that is. So I started, and it was this little software. At the time, it was called Exapta. And this is in the late 90s, before we got married. Mm-hmm. And that turns out to now that same product is actually owned by Microsoft. And so that really was the trajectory of my career. And
what made you think of graduate school?
So what made me think of graduate school is when I went to work so I actually got laid off from a a company called Navision, right? It was
Right.
like
I
all the
remember
mergers
that
and all of
because
that.
I was with a
Yep.
company then that I
Yep.
didn't like, and we were
Well,
really
I got
we
picked
were
up.
struggling, man. We were like,
Yeah, we
this is
did.
how we're going to make ends meet.
Exactly. Well, I got picked up by a partner because I've worked with a lot of partners, and so I got picked up within a couple of weeks. So I didn't stay out of work very long.
It was a total God moment because we were worried because, and then we ended up getting 2 salaries from your side along with my job that I hated. I still stayed at, and that was an interesting time.
Well, through that transition, that company also got bought out by another company, and as I started working with more and more companies, there was just there felt a need to have another set of letters, right, but behind my title, not just the undergraduate, and they paid for school,
right?
So I mean, when you have a company that is having those kind of benefits, I use them. And Matei was actually a toddler when I went back to school for my MBA, and it took me I guess 3.5 years. But I went all year round, so I just kept doing it all through.
But it was my belief that you did all of that because your mom had a glass ceiling because of her lack of degree.
That's right, she did. She had a glass ceiling because she didn't finish her education. And look, in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, there was still a glass ceiling for women. And, it was kind of becoming the time where women were finally starting to break through. And be able to be taken more seriously, and I think it did help. I given my what I was doing, I was a consultant, right? A consultant for business, right? Understanding businesses, how they needed to structure process, and my knack for information is also based on process, so I'm really good at that. And so being educated, right, with those things really helped in winning credibility with our customers,
right? Which is always fun. It's always been a struggle with your career. I mean, because it just seems, especially internationally, women gaining respect.
And I try to, and I don't know how to say this without sounding maybe like a snob. When you are a woman, and if you're an attractive woman, it's very difficult because you'll be seen first. For those attributes, not your brains.
And let me just interject here. She did try to fight that because when she was at those smaller companies, she wore the most hideous clothing, and she's like, "Well, I want
moderate, conservative."
It was I think modern conservative is modern day for hideous. But anyway, she wore these clothes, and she's like, "Well, I don't want to promote my looks." I'm like, "Sweetheart, you can wear a burlap sack. They're going to find you attractive." And finally, when she got with the company she's with now and became, upper executive, then she started shopping at Nordstrom's and Bloomingdale's. And then she started looking the part. Still very attractive. But again, with those letters after her name, the looks and the letters, I think, sort of matched up, and I don't think she worried about that as much. But God, that was so funny.
I didn't worry about it as much as I got older, and now I don't worry about it at all because now I'm just old. But it is something that women still fight, throughout their careers, and unfortunately, now we find ourselves going back in time as opposed to progressing, because I think we were in a great spot where women's opinions, the skills that you brought to the table were being heard. And in the past couple of years, I would say maybe the past 4 or 5 years, I've seen a revert back. Now, because I'm an older woman now, I have less patience and I'm more confident. So I actually speak up to those things where before I probably wouldn't have spoken up as much, but I speak up now. And I,
by the way, that has never been a problem at home. So that must be a corporate block that she has, because she's never had that problem.
I'm definitely a communicator.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely communicate.
Yeah, she's a communicator, all right.
I don't make my feelings. I don't hide them very, very well. I probably do a better job now, just because I think it's easier when you do get older. You recognize that as much as somebody may, something that somebody does may know you, whether it's your husband, your kids, or whatever, you always have to remember they're also putting up with you. And they do, they put up with me and my, whatever the mood swing of the day may be, or, whatever craziness is going on. And so I think
and
we
that's
all do better when we remember that
other people have to put up with you.
We have our own quirks, right?
But going through that cycle where our kids, were growing up and we were trying to struggle so much, corporately. What is some of your favorite memories? Because
I wanted to go back to the education part for a minute.
Okay.
I didn't go back to the story about before we got married. And so, yeah.
Okay. So,
yeah. So because you were about to tell the story and then we kind of got a little bit diverted.
Yes.
So when I was going to school, I think the stick-to-itiveness that you need to have for yourself. I had worked 9 years for an undergraduate degree. I couldn't always go to school. I couldn't always afford it. And it was really important that I finish my education. And so we were getting married, and I was in my last semester. It was my very last semester, which is always the hardest. And you have, your classes, and there's group projects, and, all these things that you need to do and make sure that you're going to graduate. And so I just told him, I'm not going to be human for the next 14 weeks. That's the semester. And one night he goes, well, I might as well just live alone because you're never really around. And I went, that's fine. The door is there. Don't let it hit you on the way out. Because if that's the support that I can expect in our marriage, then I don't want any part of it. And I think that that was an eye-opener for you, and probably even an eye-opener for myself, that we needed to support each other in the dreams and the passions, that we have. And if we weren't going to do that for each other outside of marriage, that wasn't going to happen inside of marriage. And I think that was an interesting turning point for both of us.
Okay. Was that before or after you threw the plate?
It was before.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
I just thought that it struck me as funny at the time because, I'd always been a registered black belt as long as she's known me. And when I used to tick her off, of course, when you tick off your other half, you're doing it. So I would just get calmer and I would really enjoy it. And one time she threw a plate at me and I'm thinking like, okay, I'm registered black belt, I'm armed, and she's throwing a plate.
But I think when you laughed, I was like, stand there, I'll be right back.
Yeah. I didn't stand there and laugh very long. So anyway, I digress. So memories growing up, like or as our family grew up, because I remember one time Alex would play with a Thomas the Tank Engine play set. And I remember we finally got that for him for Christmas. And he goes down the hall and he looks at us and he looks at the PlayStation. He looks at us and he looks at it was the old Thomas Tank Engine table and had the train.
It was like this size.
He could not believe it was in his house. And neither one of us thought of videotaping it or taking a picture. Just totally missed that moment. Although it's etched in my memory.
Which is the most important place.
Yeah, but God, it would have been nice to have that go viral because that was so awesome. But what are some of your memories, like
when I was a kid? Or?
No, as our family grew up, because, we had the small house that we eventually moved in the house we're in now, but the boys just kind of going up, and like I learned a lot doing the interview with the boys, and they talk about zipping each other up in sleeping bags and going down the stairs, which, by the way, I never knew about, and I don't know if you did, but anyway, what are some of your memories of the knuckleheads?
Well, I think with Alex, it's different for each one, right? Because, Alex, we had him for, 6 years, right? Before we had Matei, and we lost our daughter in between. But Alex, he was always a devious one. Like he was always thinking. He was always thinking up interesting, counting. Like he was very OCD-ish, I guess.
He was always counting. We called him Rain Man behind his back. He'd be like, what you counting now, Rain Man?
Yeah. And his trucks had to be just aligned just so. But he was a wonderful kid to take anywhere. Like you could take Alex anywhere. And we did.
And still a good-hearted man.
And still a good-hearted kid.
Yep.
But we flew him to. He and my mom went with me to Denmark. We all went to Canada.
We went to. I took him to Australia. Yeah.
And then Mom, when they went to Denmark, I was doing a conference, and so Grandma and Alex came to Denmark with me. So he was a well-traveled kid internationally. And of course, when Matei came along, we all went to Germany,
right?
As well. And so, and that's a memorable moment. I think the travel with the kids that we've been able to experience because of my work, even though it was kind of on the back of work sometimes, was memorable.
Right.
Australia was memorable, right? It was something we enjoyed. You and I have gone to Amsterdam, and we've been in Hungary, and together. So we've been able to just use it and enjoy kind of the perks of it to experience other cultures and other countries. And but
Hungary good, Amsterdam bad. Hated Amsterdam. But anyway, I digress. As we were getting into the new house and getting the family up to speed, you did mention, loss of our daughter, and I wanted to mention the gaining of Wendy as a member of our family. And I think you've gravitated toward her maybe because of the fact that, we didn't have a successful pregnancy with our daughter. And, Alex and I were joking during his podcast segment. He said, "Oh, Wendy will leave our house when she's 40." So,
I think
and we get good news about her often.
Yeah, she has been a blessing, and I don't think she realizes that.
And we've gained her for anybody that didn't catch the other podcast, through the foster system, because we tried to really make that system work within our home. But I think Wendy's going to be our last. She attempt.
is, and she is, and she's signing out because she's turning 18 as well. So we'll actually be able to finally take a picture with her, and and things like that.
And she's still going to be a member of our family.
She's still going to be a member of our family and live with us, and and she is expecting. So we're trying to work with her and and the baby's father. But she's a blessing. She's from a different culture, and sometimes those are things that we have to to understand. But she has no family here, and
but she is an American citizen.
And she is an American citizen. And she lived here in America until she was 6, and then her parents took her back to Mexico, and that's where they lived. And her grandmother, is a midwife there, and she has other siblings who are also American citizens that are still living in Mexico, and that's where they would like to to remain, which is fine. She came back to the U.S. when she was 15. And unfortunately, not really a good family situation in general, and so they did not treat her well.
As someone who came from an orphanage, I think she just has a lot more opportunity here, and but I don't want to make it sound like me, a American, telling someone from Mexico that they, even though they were born here, they have more opportunity here. I just think she does.
Absolutely. She does. And I think she's a beautiful artist. And so I hope that she looks towards, like a career somehow that she can, work in the arts, because I think she's just, she's amazing at it. And it's a real talent for her.
And enjoys the process.
Right, yeah. Right. She's just, she's just very sweet. And so we've enjoyed having her part of the family. And I think you were saying that she's like, God's gift, right? To make up. And, there's no making up for a lost daughter.
Understood. Right.
For sure. But if we can help one person to have,
and that's the reason we really got into the foster system, because the adoption system, which is what I went through, worked out so well. I just, let's face it, we've both been successful, and we have resources, and you can't take anything with you, and you don't want to leave so much to your kids that they end up fighting over it. So what can the resources be used for? And I think Wendy,
it's being a good steward.
That's
I think
right.
we're called, not I think, the Bible tells us clearly that we're called to be good stewards with what God has provided. It belongs to Him. And so if this is where he wants us to provide those resources, then that's what we're going to do.
That's right.
For
and as
time.
a country western song goes, there's no such thing as a hearse carrying a U-Haul.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But if, I asked the boys this, and obviously you're still, within your career, even albeit at a very high level. What's your 5-year plan? We often talk about our exit strategy, like our retirement plan. Like I'm thinking it's going to be something involving coaching or, maybe taking all my off-ice equipment and taking it down to the hood and finding a public park and just training people for free or whatever. But what's your 5-year plan or your exit strategy?
I think you mentioned it earlier. I would love to do something in ministry. That would be absolutely wonderful.
I think that's spot on.
I may do it under the guise, though. So I did start an LLC. Which
Tell them the name.
So
tell them the name.
It's called Karen Services. I'm the Karen on your side.
And we would always call her Karen because she was always caring for someone, none of her damn business. So she finally started an LLC, and it's called Karen.
It's CAREN, Karen Services.
Yeah, right. We all know what it means.
LLC. Yep.
It's awesome. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a way to try and to help people, right? Figure out a
Be
way
Snoopy
to
Snoop
help
and get
people.
in other people's business and get paid for it.
Exactly. I'm so good at it.
You are.
So good at it.
Yeah, you are.
I'm really good at finding information if something can be done, if at all possible. I am a nightmare for DFACs. They'll be happy probably to get rid of me.
And she's a nightmare for uneducated people. I see her, she's on this thing called Christian TikTok, so I can follow her lives through my TikTok account. And I see people get on there that are just uninformed, even about their own religion. So people will call, my Quran says, oh, your Quran says what? What copy do you have? Because I have a copy right here, and it doesn't say that. Can you show me where it says that? Tell me where it is. I can find it in my Quran. And next thing you know, they block her and they're gone.
Here's the sad part. Here's the sad part about that. People who will claim Christianity do the same thing with the Bible. And I think that is absolutely tragic. That if you were going to look, we should all, as believers,
that's right. Worst thing about Christianity
in our Lord and Savior
is
Jesus Christ,
that's right.
Then understand the gospel. Understand what Jesus actually came here to do, and his love for humanity so much that he died on the cross, and he asks us to carry ours every day. And so I think people have repeated things that they have heard, but they've never actually read it or understood it. And here's something small. I hear it all the time. Satan, convinced a third of the angels, to follow him. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that, by the way. Nowhere. Where that comes from is a verse in Revelation where Satan and his followers followed him. His angel following. It doesn't say a third. A third comes from the stars falling in the skies, actual asteroids in the Greek. And so people just pick up things and they repeat them, but it doesn't actually say those things. So even as Christians, we need to study to show thyself approved. The Bible doesn't say read to show thyself approved. It says to study to show thyself approved. And let's understand what our own Bible, what the Word of God is saying to us. And so I feel like I can help other people even from an Islamic Quranic perspective, because I'm actually studying, right? And so they don't read theirs, and some Christians don't read theirs either.
Right.
And so I don't do it to disrespect any Muslims.
No, but they have to enhance their relationship. People talk about a relationship. But
you need to understand what it is that you're believing
That's
in.
correct.
If you're going to say you believe that and you're willing to die for it, then you need to be sure that you understand what it is that you're dying for.
Well, it's like any other relationship. I can't be in a relationship without knowing about you. I mean, whenever you enter a relationship, whether it be dating or marriage, the first thing let me find out about this person.
That's right.
Let me find out about their family, where they're from, what they believe. The first lunch we ever had, I mean, it was basically like an interview. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Are you a woman of faith? And she's like, is the interview over? I go, the first interview is over lunch. second one's over dinner?
I think it was my brother, though. That was kind of the kicker for you because, and we haven't talked about my brother.
Oh, that's right.
And you know, that was also a very tragic time.
Yeah, explain about your brother, because that is a fascinating story that we did skip over.
Yeah, so my brother, he was 33, and he dove into a pool and broke his neck, and he was a quadriplegic from that day forward. And but
a badass before that, though. Like,
and even after, like, let me tell you, the things he could do in his wheelchair,
right,
without any arms or any legs is, you know.
But you always told me he was bound for something.
He was bound for something. Like, he was going to do it his way. But he didn't have insurance. When it happened, he had just gotten a job, had moved from another state back into South Carolina, and you know, that was a turning point too for me, just in terms of Christianity. I had an uncle who was very religious, and I'm going to put all the quotes around religious. And my family has land in South Carolina, or did at the time, those who haven't sold it off. And we needed 1 acre. So after my brother came out of rehabilitation from Shepherd's Spinal and all of these things,
right.
And he was vent dependent, so he needed 24/7 care. And so we wanted 1 acre to put a home on, so that he would have a place to live, and he and his wife and her kids, right, would be able to have a life. And our own family, one brother would not sign over because they all had to agree, and he wouldn't do it. And that was the quote unquote religious one, you know, the one that went around touting Jesus. And I was like, you know what? If this is what Christianity is, I want nothing to do with it. And I was, you know, I was about 20. So I was in my 20s, you know, at the time. And it was maybe a couple of years later that I think God tugged at my heart. I was driving in my car on my way to work. And I knew immediately. I was like, it's you. That's the void. It's you. I know it's you, God. I hear you. And that put me on a path to seeking, you know, God, because I had turned away from that because I was just so upset. Right.
But I think I think a lot of people's story has been like that. I've seen so many baptism videos where people go, I did it my way. I went down this road. I did X. I did Y. I did Z. Then God said, hey, how about my plan for you? How about doing it my way?
Yeah.
And I think I know I've had that revelation. It sounds like that at that point you had that revelation as well.
Yeah. And I think the memory of that is with my uncle, and it reminds me of what people do today when they speak these words, and they will talk about Jesus and a Christian nation, and their
faith without
hearts
works
are full of hate,
right,
and full of condemnation, and that's not my Savior. So I think that he was kind of like that. Just this, right. They turn it into a checklist. They turn it into a, I don't know. It's like the Pharisees, right? I could wash my hands and I could do all of these things, but our hearts were never near.
But getting back
God.
to your brother, it had a happy ending because he had a great home, and he
became a Christian as a result of it. So, you know, while there is tragedy there, I lost my brother that day, right? Even though he lived for another 12 years, I lost my brother that day. But there's a part that was gained, which is he did become a Christian. And an actual Christian, and he was all about, you know, Christ, you know, in the end, and then he was living, and so while it was a tragic accident that took him as well, again, because of the ventilator, I think that I know that I'll see him again, and so there's relief and there's comfort in that, because
whenever I think about your brother, I think about the time I went to visit him at Shepherd. And he was having his hamstring pulled up to make a glute muscle because he had spent too much time in his chair, doing all the stuff they told him he shouldn't be doing, which is totally his personality. So I remember going into his room at Shepherd, and there was this jar of Vaseline. It had to be the size of a red box. It was the biggest jar of Vaseline I'd ever seen in my life. And I looked at him and I looked at the Vaseline. I go, dude, I must have missed one hell of a party. And he starts laughing on the bed. He goes, you have to leave. And oh my goodness. But again, your brother was like your dad. He came around. He was always supportive of us. And I remember a lot of fun trips.
From the beginning. He was supportive from the beginning. My father grew up and I grew up in a separate but equal. So something that I don't know if you remember. So my grandmother on my father's side. So I am a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Yeah, I remember your grandmother being at Thanksgiving with my mother. And the N word was spoken.
Well, but that was on my mom's side, so that's different. So on my dad's side, now, because my grandmother passed when I was 16, but she had already put me in the Daughters of the American Revolution, and so
they got to be rolling over in their grave now,
right? So my grandfather, now he was really my step grandfather because my dad's dad had passed away when I was about 6 weeks old from alcoholism.
Wow.
And I'll tell you another funny one that you don't know here in a second. But so they were separate but equal. Like, you remember the show Different Strokes?
Yes.
I couldn't watch that show when I was at their house.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was
black
very,
and white people
and I didn't grow up around black. I didn't grow up around black
Understood.
people. I grew up in a small town, Valhalla, 3,000 population. I think there may have been one black family, and I think the first time I met him, and he was at the health department, I think I said, "Hey, stupid."
Right.
Like that was just kind of getting away from that. Thank goodness, long term. But
right.
So my father initially, was like, "Hey, you've taken a left turn." And
right.
I was like, that is the worst thing I've ever heard, that somebody would go, "I taken a left turn because of the color of the skin that you had."
Right.
Now, eventually my father liked you better than he liked me, I think, because he was trying to figure out how to, he could win the lottery so he could help your business. And you just won them over. And which is not surprising, but it was such an amazing shift, right, for them to see. It's just people, right? We're all just people.
During your brother's funeral, I realized that when I went up on the mountain, and I remember I thought I had to go off the mountain and get a hotel room because everybody was tied up with the funeral, and there weren't any hotels on the mountain. And one of your friends said, your money's no good here, boy. I'm like, oh Lord, what is it? What do you mean by that?
You could stay there.
That's exactly right. And we didn't change a diaper. We didn't cook a meal. They treated us better than anybody in my family had ever treated us.
Right.
And I didn't know any of them from Adam.
Right.
But they knew you. And that's all
that mattered.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
awesome.
it goes both ways. Don't judge either by the look. Just because somebody has a rebel flag on the back of their truck doesn't mean anything.
They could have a really good heart.
My brother was like, "That's my heritage," and I would laugh and I was go, "You were born in Florida. What are you talking about?"
That's hilarious.
Heritage.
He had a rebel flag on the back of his wheelchair at our wedding. That was awesome.
So Boys in the Hood meets Deliverance. It was hilarious.
Our wedding was really, it was crazy because my relatives ate and left. So if you've ever been to a black wedding, it's all about the food, right? Okay, your food, the cake, and champagne toast, and then unless it's a party, everybody's leaving. Her relatives, I think, stayed overnight because I thought they had gotten a room because we're at breakfast because we were about to take a flight to Aruba.
Yeah,
for our honeymoon.
Stayed at the hotel.
Right.
Yeah.
And I looked at these guys and go, "Oh, did you get a room?" I was like, "Hell no, the bar just closed an hour ago. We're going to go bass fishing." I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm married into Jeff Foxworthy's family." It was hilarious. But they
and
were
Alex and I actually went fishing. So I'm the one that did the fishing thing. So I took my son up to the mountains where I grew up, and a friend of mine that I went to school. Yeah, he was the game warden. And so we went to all the rivers to fish. Of course,
I wasn't jealous in the least because I can't do any of that.
Oh yeah, and it was great. We had and that's what we ate all weekend. Whatever we caught, that's what we ate.
That's awesome.
And Alex had a blast. But he and I are both, we're introverts. I'm more introvert extrovert. Alex is complete introvert, and you and Matei are just extrovert.
Did you hear the part where she says she's an introvert? Did anybody hear that?
I have to recharge. So as much as I can do this and I can speak to people and I love it, there's that recharge that I have to have. I can't stay on constantly.
Yeah, Alex was funny because we do these podcasts at my little studio at an ice rink, and I had gone outside after our podcast with Alex, and I started talking to hockey dads, and I'm talking for like a half hour. He goes, "Dude, you just finished talking for an hour,
Right.
and like you don't. It's like you don't even stop." And it's like I love it. And speaking of loving it, so what would you say I didn't ask? What story didn't we tell that they should know?
That they should know. I don't know. I don't know if there's any story that you didn't tell. I think those were kind of the highlights. I think, the big thing for me that I will identify with now is more on the ministry side, the Hebrew side.
Right.
Like literally, I almost have an undergraduate.
Well, and I would say more like a graduate. I mean, just because that's been your study for the last, probably half dozen years.
Yeah, it really has. And I think the importance of my identity in that is become really important. And I'm struggling now, with what to do with that given the current times.
Right.
And it is a struggle for me because there's so much frustration that I feel that people don't want to hear, and I don't know how to get through to people. They don't want to hear the depths of the Bible. They just want to hear the surface stories, and it's a struggle.
Well,
for me
and I feel the same way with my profession. I've often talked about this as my fitness ministry because I see a lot of correlations between promoting the kingdom of Christ and promoting fitness, because it's one of those things. Everybody want to go to heaven, don't nobody want to die.
Right.
Everybody want to be fit, don't nobody want to work out.
Yeah.
And it's like I've been in the fitness industry for over 30 years, and yet every year, especially it's coming up on the end of the year, I'm going to hear about New Year's resolutions. Everybody's going to eat right. Everybody's going to work out. Really? How's that worked out for the last few years of your life?
Yeah.
And the same thing with Christ. You're supposed to have a relationship with Christ. Well, how can you have a relationship with somebody you don't communicate with, you don't know anything about, and don't have a thirst to find out about? I mean, you need to have a thirst to find out about your Lord and Savior and have a relationship with Him.
Right. But that means depth and the things of the depth.
Yeah, well, that's how relationships work, right? Right. It's either moving forward,
exactly,
it's stagnant, or it's coming to an end.
That's right. Exactly. But people don't want to hear that. And oddly enough, the ones that I struggle with the most are ones that love their King James version of the Bible. And when I start talking to people about word origins, right? So part of understanding who you're in a relationship with is understanding their culture. And that's kind of like with our foster daughter, Wendy, right? Part of understanding her and loving who she is understanding her culture. Right. And Jesus is the same way. He's a Jewish culture. So can I tell you one story that I think is amazing?
This is your podcast, sweetheart. So you just say whatever you need.
I can be Oprah, like legally.
Stop. Tell your story.
No, okay. All right. So here's a beautiful story, and what I mean by the depth. So Jesus, he talks about the cup of wine, right? You remember the Last Supper, right?
I do.
And you take the wine, okay. And you drink this in remembrance of him, and it's the body and blood of Christ. Well, let's back up to Mary and Joseph. So Mary and Joseph were married for all intents and purposes, right? So there are two stages, actually several stages, but two main stages to a Galilean wedding. Actually a Jewish wedding, but Galilean specifically. And Jesus was Galilean. Right. The difference between a Judean wedding and a Galilean wedding is that it's the father that decides when the groom is ready to go get his bride. So here's how it works. So Mary and Joseph would have been at stage one, where the dowry, the contract is written, money is exchanged. They're not buying the wife, they're giving money for the bride. So if anything happens to the groom between then and when the wedding ceremony is, she is well cared for. That's what the money was for. So that's the dowry and the contract. Now, at that time, the groom would give a cup of wine to the bride. And if she took the cup and drank from it, she accepted the proposal. So it was always the woman who decided whether this marriage was moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So the cup is given, she drinks it, and now you're engaged, right?
So
and
now you bring that forward to the Last Supper.
So you're betrothed. So then what happens is the groom goes away for maybe a year or more, and his job is to make a room for his bride. And then when the room is ready, the father determines when the groom is ready and says, you can now go get your bride. And then they blow the horns. And so that's why it says the bride needs to be ready. The whole wedding party, not even knowing when they're coming, needs to be ready. Everything needs to be prepared. So when they come and blow the horn, then the wedding happens at that moment.
Right. And there are several Bible stories that refer to that.
Right. So that's the wedding allegory of Jesus, right? So it's only the Father, right, that will determine. So people go, well, how is Jesus God if he didn't know, like, when he's coming back? And it's like, it doesn't say that. That word there is, it's only the Father to reveal when the Son is going to come back and claim his bride, which is us, the church. And so you see this beautiful wedding allegory that the horn will blow, the shofar will blow, and the angels will blow that, saying that Jesus is returning. So this is Jesus telling you, right, through this analogy of relationship, of covenant, of marriage, and using the marriage covenant to articulate how he is coming back for his bride.
Right.
And those are the depths of the word that I think we miss when we don't understand the culture.
Right. And people learn Bible stories, like you hear about the virgins waiting for the bridegroom to return in the oil, give me some of your oil because
you weren't ready.
That's right. You weren't ready. But now, with our culture, especially the culture I grew up in, we reverse the role. So we give the woman plenty of wine so that they take the dowry, which is our ring, and they accept it. So we kind of flip the script, but I digress.
But I think those are the depths of the word, that when you understand that, it gives more meaning and understanding to where things are going in the Bible. And so I think it's also a story right now, no matter how people feel about the election.
That's right. Because this is post-election.
Because this is post-election.
Trump and Vice President Harris.
Yeah, there is hope in the eternal part, right, in God's plan.
Right. God's still in charge.
He's still in charge. I know that people don't like that. I get it. I truly understand that.
Well, they used to use that same thing in slavery, like, oh, you'll get your reward eventually.
Eternity is the reward, and we do have to remember that, no matter what's happening, in this small vapor.
But it doesn't help that a lot of people are suffering.
A lot of people are going,
and they're really going to suffer in the next 4 years.
Yeah, it's going to be, yeah.
But I
would say
talk
prepare
about
your
that.
hearts.
Yeah, I talk about that with people. I'm like, being biracial, I understand someone had to suffer. The loving couple had to suffer for us to have a marriage.
Right.
Because at one point, our marriage was illegal.
Yep.
And there were people that had to get the poop kicked out of them at a lunch counter for me to be able to leave this studio and go and have lunch wherever I want to have lunch.
Well, it's the same for women. I mean, women couldn't own a business in their own name until 1986.
Yeah, what's up with those laws? Like, I know Trump's going to bring back things. So, that may be one of the things we need to look at bringing back. Is that whole checking account, and you can't go out of the country or do anything without I say so. I could, MAGA, I don't know, I could be convinced. No, I can't. Stop it. I don't even want to put that out there. Somebody take that 10-second clip and that'll haunt me for the rest of my life.
Exactly right. Yes, that's exactly what would happen. See, you said it.
Well, I just think your story is a great story. Your story is something that people can tell their kids and go, look, this woman did not accept the barefoot and pregnant, life that people wanted for her. She chose the life she wanted. And even now in her success, she can choose her exit strategy, what she wants to do with her life and her resources in, the final years of her career and post-career, so that she can
have a support system. I mean, it's so important that you choose
we
wisely.
Have a bunch of knuckleheads in our house. I don't know how much I'm helping in that process, but one thing I do think, we have a house that has the love of our our Savior in it, and we look at things as resources that have been given us, and we have to be good stewards. So I think we look at it the right way, and it's funny, you attract, right? Because I love, there are certain clients I've fired, and we moved to a different environment because we couldn't trust the people we were in business with. And I think as you start to do that, you attract people like, wow, they really are honest. They really are.
God has a way of cutting out people in your life.
Amen
and so
to that.
While you may not like the change that he's making
That's
for
right.
you, you may not have put that path out there. And from a job perspective, even recently, like I switched roles,
Thank
in my
the Lord.
And it's been like, it's almost like God, put a set of time for me to learn some things, which have been very beneficial, but it was not in a great environment. But in the new environment that I'm in, I'm super grateful, and I have wonderful leadership. And that's not easy to say inside of a major corporation. But right now I have beautiful, wonderful leadership that is recognizes the hard work and the things that I bring to the table, and I'm extremely grateful for that. But I know that God opened that door. That is not a door that any of these doors that we open on our own. God opened the door, but I had to go through this other door, to get here. But every step of the way, when I have left other parts of the org, and recently there were layoffs in that place. So God is very strategic in moving me. So I just totally
and God
believe
helps
that
people to help himself too, because you have an advanced degree, you're an exec, and you're a woman.
Hard.
We said if you were black, you would have been bulletproof. Like
I work hard. I will for sure, 100%. I work hard. Now, as I've gotten a little older, I do have to remember to take more time for myself, which is not something I was always very good at. And
the not drag racing classic cars, as I've learned in my old age. That's right.
Exactly. But I'm having to learn to say no and to take back time for myself and be okay that this is my time. This is what I want to do. This is what I enjoy, because it allows me to de-stress a little bit. And if I don't do that, my doctor probably has other plans for me, because
that's right. Well, but that's why I wanted to do this series, because it's funny, I can do fitness posts, and I've done hundreds, probably thousands over the years, but I wanted to talk about my family in an arc, as my son would say in the podcast, because of other families that hear about Alex and Matei and you and go, you know what? This family has a lot of blessings and a lot of gifts, but they're still a praying family. They still have God in their home, and they're still trying to make the right decisions every day. They're still in relationship with their Savior, and they're doing a lot of things right. And hopefully in their home, they're like, my kid's not as good as Alex and Matei, but I'm going to pray for them, and I'm going to make sure they have a home. Oh, absolutely not. It could change on a dime.
Well, and we've had our ups and downs.
That's right.
We have our battles, but no matter where we are in that stage, right? Because we do have to remember that, I think everybody wants everything to be hunky-dory like every day. But you could go through a period, whether that's a year or 2 years or whatever that is, into this valley place, and then, and come back out of it. And so
that's right.
You got to allow, I think the stick-to-itiveness part that I mentioned, even about education, is also applies to family.
That's right.
It applies to how we support each other, and that we're not going anywhere. Like whatever that stage that we're at or place that we're at in Mindful, we're here for each other, and we'll be here whenever they're ready, to for whatever it is that they need, right? To come out of that situation. And so I think that's the important part to remember. If you're only there when times are good, that's unfortunate, and that's tragic.
Yeah. Well, I'm proud of our family. I love our family. I love what we've built. I hope that, just through our little arc, that these 3 podcasts, that people can look at our family and go, you know what? I don't know what they're doing, but I like it. And I'm going to mirror that in my family. And, I think it's all the families like we have, all the families in this country that are like-minded and faith-based. That's what I put my faith in. I put my faith in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and the families like ours that he's supporting will overcome a bad executive, will overcome a bad government, will overcome bad times. Because in the end, I've read it, we win.
That's right.
So
It'll appear as we're losing, but in the end, Jesus wins.
that's right. That's right. And we with the J-Man. So I'm just putting it out there. Well, that was by far the final, the longest, and I think the best podcast out there. So with that, Fit Family Podcast Part 3, entitled Mama, is a wrap. Mark it, baby. That was awesome. Good. I won't have to move out.